In a quiet Oregon town, 26-year-old mechanic Ethan worked alone in his late father's garage, fixing engines for neighbors who often paid in kindness. One rainy morning, a sleek black SUV pulled up. Out stepped Victoria Lennox, a billionaire CEO, and her 9-year-old daughter Ava, whose legs hadn't moved since a spinal accident 2 years ago. Her high-tech wheelchair was malfunctioning, and no one at the tech firm could fix it. Desperate, Victoria had heard of Ethan's unconventional but brilliant repairs. "It's not the tech," Ethan said gently after examining the chair. "It's the soul of the machine that's missing." He worked for hours, not just replacing parts, but rethinking the entire structure. As Ava watched him, she asked questions, first timidly, then eagerly. Ethan responded with calm patience, teaching her what each wire did, why each bolt mattered. Victoria watched from the corner, her eyes softening. By sunset, Ethan presented a chair that not only worked, but responded better to Ava's lightest touch. When she moved forward effortlessly, a gasp escaped her lips. "Mom, I didn't have to push." Ethan smiled. "I added a subtle kinetic assist. It moves with you." Ava's joy filled the garage like sunlight after a storm. Victoria offered to pay him any amount, but Ethan refused. "Your daughter reminded me what fixing really means." Days later, Ava returned, this time just to visit. She brought her sketchbook, filled with ideas for a better wheelchair. Ethan invited her to help in the shop. What began as simple curiosity turned into routine. Each afternoon, Ava watched, learned, even helped. Slowly, her hands grew, skilled, and her eyes lit up with something Victoria hadn't seen in years: purpose. The garage that once echoed with silence now hummed with hope, laughter, and the clink of possibility. Ava's wheelchair wasn't just better, it was evolving. Ethan and Ava designed a prototype together, one that allowed her to shift posture, climb inclines, and even sense terrain. Word spread. A medical rep from California visited, stunned by the chair's responsiveness. Offers rolled in, but Ethan turned them down. "We're not done yet," he said. Victoria was amazed. She saw how her daughter, once quiet and isolated, now spoke confidently of mechanics, design, and innovation. Ava wasn't just healing, she was becoming. And the heart of it all was that humble garage, and the man who believed broken things still had stories to write. The collaboration between Ethan and Ava deepened. They stayed up late testing motors, adjusting sensors, and debating design tweaks. Ethan taught Ava not just how things worked, but how to believe in what they could become. He saw her not as a fragile child in a chair, but as a mind, brimming with untapped potential. Victoria, watching from afar, saw something shift in herself too. She started showing up earlier, sometimes bringing sandwiches, sometimes just listening. The garage was changing all of them, not just Ava. It had become a place where impossibilities were quietly challenged by patience and care. One evening, after weeks of late-night work, Ava rolled out in the latest version of the chair, sleek, responsive, almost alive. It could adjust to her slightest lean, react to uneven surfaces, and even link to her voice. She raced across the parking lot and back, arms wide, face glowing. "I feel like I'm flying," she shouted. Ethan chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "You are, Ava, you really are." Victoria's eyes welled with tears as she watched her daughter reclaim a freedom she thought lost forever. It wasn't just mobility, it was liberation, and no price tag could define that moment. Ethan's garage became a quiet legend in town. Strangers came with wheelchairs, walkers, and broken devices. He didn't advertise. He didn't charge fixed prices. People gave what they could, and he gave them dignity in return. Ava often acted as his assistant, greeting people, sketching improvements, even troubleshooting. She was only 9, but her mind ran like a gearbox always turning. For Victoria, watching her daughter's transformation was more valuable than every dollar she'd ever made. In that garage, she saw her daughter not just surviving, but thriving, powered by grit, grease, and the steady hand of a mechanic who never gave up. Months passed, and Ethan and Ava unveiled their most advanced prototype yet. The chair had gyroscopic balance, AI-enhanced control, and could sync with Ava's smartwatch for terrain adaptation. They called it the Phoenix, after a drawing Ava had made of a bird rising from flames. A local news crew came to cover the story, and soon their story spread. Universities called. Innovators wanted to collaborate. Victoria fielded calls from investors. But Ethan, still in his oil-streaked overalls, said the same thing to everyone. We're not building a product. We're building hope. Ava smiled beside him, nodding. She understood. She always had. Victoria sat across from Ethan one evening, the garage quiet, except for the ticking of cooling metal. "You've changed her life," she said softly. Ethan shook his head. "She changed her own. I just gave her tools." Silence lingered between them, not awkward but full. "I was wrong about people like you," Victoria admitted, "about what really matters." Ethan looked at her, eyes gentle. "We all carry broken things. Sometimes someone just has to believe they're still worth fixing." As Ava came, rolling in with a tray of cookies she'd baked herself, the moment broke into laughter. Life, after all, was rolling forward. On Ava's 10th birthday, the town gathered at the garage. Balloons floated above car lifts, kids ran among toolboxes. Ava gave a demo of the Phoenix, climbing ramps and pivoting gracefully. The crowd erupted in cheers. But the real surprise came when Victoria stepped onto the makeshift stage. She announced the formation of a non-profit Wings of Steel, co-founded by Ethan and Ava, to design and distribute adaptive mobility devices for children across the country. The crowd cheered louder. Ethan was stunned. Victoria smiled. "The world needs more places like this garage," she said, "and more hearts like the ones inside it." That night, as the garage lights dimmed and guests departed, Ethan sat beside Ava, watching her doodle a new design. She looked up at him. "Do you think we can build one that can hop curbs next?" He laughed. "With you on the team, we can do anything." Outside, the wind whispered through the trees and the stars hung above like silent witnesses to a story that had just begun. The world hadn't changed. In one grand gesture, it had shifted gently, like the turning of a wheel in the hands of a girl and a mechanic who never stopped believing. One crisp morning, Victoria arrived at Ethan's garage, with a gleam in her eyes and a file clutched in her hand. Stanford's biomedical department reviewed Ava's prototype, she said. "They're requesting a private demonstration. Ethan, they think you've done what their labs haven't." Ava, now 10 but still clinging to Ethan's presence like a steadying force, grabbed his sleeve. "Will you come with me?" He smiled gently and nodded. That same afternoon, preparations began. They fine-tuned the wheelchair's sensors, calibrated the adaptive terrain response, and customized speech-assisted controls for Ava to present independently. This wasn't just a visit, it was a revolution. Days later, Ethan, Ava, and Victoria flew to California. The Stanford auditorium was packed: professors, engineers, biotech specialists, and curious graduate students. The room fell into murmurs as Ava rolled onto the stage, confidently maneuvering the chair's height and posture with flawless precision. She began speaking, not from a script, but from her heart. "This isn't just tech," she said. "It's my freedom." Then she demonstrated it, gliding forward, turning in place, ascending a short ramp with ease. The audience grew silent. One elderly professor wiped away tears. "We build machines," he said softly, "but you've given them soul." Ethan stood at the back, arms folded, his work shirt still stained with oil. After the presentation, offers came flying in grants and startup proposals, university fellowships, but he had only one condition: Ava must lead the project. "This is her vision," Ethan said simply. I just helped her build it." The committee was stunned by the humility, but even more so by Ava's insight and design clarity. They unanimously approved a Stanford partnership. Back in Oregon, Victoria was overwhelmed by joy, but even she knew this wasn't just a product. Breakthrough. This was a purpose awakening in a little girl. When they returned home, the garage began to change. Workbenches multiplied. Computers were installed. The once dusty corners now gleamed with tools, screens and model components. Ava sat beside Ethan each day, redesigning wheels with pressure-adjust sensors, improving terrain mapping, and sketching new lift systems. Victoria funded everything quietly but refused to interfere. This was Ava's space now. Within a month, the garage had become a full-fledged design lab. Ethan stayed in the background, guiding gently, but letting Ava take the lead. The town watched in awe as the mechanics shack blossomed into a workshop that now buzzed with innovation and promise. Word spread beyond Oregon. Parents of children with disabilities began writing letters, sending emails, even showing up at the shop. They asked for advice, custom wheelchairs, or just to meet Ava. She welcomed them all, often giving mini-tours and demonstrating her latest features. Ethan, never one for attention, focused on refining the structural designs, while Ava handled the human side. They started, inviting children to test the prototypes, listening closely to feedback. One girl suggested adding a music panel. A boy asked if his chair could dance. Ava made notes for everything. These weren't just features, they were futures. Ava's transformation was more than physical, it was spiritual. She began speaking at small conferences, then larger ones. Her story, the girl who rebuilt her own wings, began appearing in magazines and blogs. Local high school students volunteered to help in the lab. Ethan taught them wiring and assembly. Ava explained the philosophy. No two chairs should feel the same. We're not copying, we're customizing lives. Victoria watched with tears in her eyes. Her daughter, once fragile and withdrawn, now led a team of minds and hearts. Ethan, in his quiet corner, just smiled. For him, success never needed a spotlight. A year passed, and Ava was invited to the Seattle International Tech Expo. She would be the youngest presenter in the event's history. On stage, in front of thousands, she wore jeans and sneakers, her hands slightly greasy from last-minute adjustments. "Hi, I'm Ava Lennox," she said confidently. "And this wheelchair changed everything for me. But what mattered more is that someone believed I could change it too." The crowd was captivated. Then she demonstrated the next generation. Prototype self-leveling wheels, pressure-based terrain sensing, and real-time health monitoring. It wasn't science fiction anymore, it was a 10-year-old girl making dreams move. After the expo, news stations and tech magazines flooded the workshop. Reporters camped outside, investors called non-stop. Victoria created a media buffer to protect Ethan and Ava, but inside the garage nothing changed. Ethan still arrived before sunrise, his hands blackened with grease by noon. Ava still insisted on testing every adjustment herself. She often said, "If I don't love riding it, no one else will." They named their startup Soul Motion, not after machinery, but after the belief that even a chair could carry the soul of its rider. People didn't just want the product, they wanted the spirit behind it. Months later, Ava's idea expanded beyond wheelchairs. They began working on assisted walkers for seniors, custom prosthetics for children, and even AI-powered crutches that adjusted to gait changes. Ethan recruited retired mechanics, Ava invited her classmates, and Victoria brought in project managers. But the heart of the operation stayed simple. Every design started with a person's story. Ethan would say, "Tell me about them, not their diagnosis." And Ava would add, "We build for lives, not limitations." Their designs were infused with understanding, and that made all the difference. People weren't just walking again, they were finally seen again. As the years passed, the original garage was preserved like a museum. New facilities, were built nearby. A development center, a fabrication lab, even a training institute for students with disabilities. But every major decision still happened inside that old garage. Eva insisted on it. She'd run her fingers across the old workbench now, nicked and worn, and say, "This is where I found my voice." Ethan, ever humble, refused interviews, but the world knew who he was. When Time magazine featured Eva as Innovator of the Year, she made sure Ethan's name appeared, right under hers, Builder of Second Chances. On Ava's 12th birthday, Victoria held a surprise gala in Portland to honor both Ethan and her daughter. The room was packed with CEOs, engineers, and families whose lives had changed because of Soul Motion. Ava, in a sleek, custom-designed dress with wheelchair-matching tones, rolled to the microphone. "I used to think I couldn't do anything," she began. "Now I can't stop imagining what we can build next." She turned toward Ethan in the front row. "You didn't just fix my chair. You fixed how I saw myself." The audience stood in applause. Ethan, ever shy, simply tipped his cap. Despite the fame, Ethan never left the small town. He refused to move into corporate offices. "If I leave this garage, I forget why I started," he told a journalist once. The town, which had long seen him as just a quiet loner, now held an annual celebration called Fix-It Day in his honor. People brought broken things, lawnmowers, toasters, even old instruments, and he fixed them, always. Refusing payment, Ava loved those days best. "It reminds me," she said, "that fixing is more than a job. It's love in motion." She'd often surprise kids by letting them try out the latest prototype. Victoria, once consumed by boardrooms and bottom lines, now ran non-profit initiatives supporting mechanical programs in underfunded schools. She opened a scholarship in her late husband's name for kids with disabilities pursuing STEM fields. At board meetings, she now quoted Ava, "Design with empathy first, the rest will follow." Her transformation was just as profound. She used to think money solved everything. Now she believed in what Ethan and Ava had built, a way of thinking that changed how people moved, how they saw themselves and how the world saw them. She had built empires, but this legacy, she said, was her truest. At the heart of every innovation was still that bond between Ava and Ethan. They'd disagree on designs, laugh over failed experiments, and celebrate each tiny breakthrough. They shared an unspoken understanding, something born of that rainy day when Ava's old chair first came into the garage. He never saw her as broken, and she never saw him as just a mechanic. Together they created something the world didn't know it needed. Every time they rolled out a new model, Ava smiled and said, "Ready to change another life?" Ethan would nod. "Always." And then they'd get back to work. In a letter Ava wrote for her future self, tucked away inside the garage wall, she penned, "If the world forgets how we started, I hope they remember why. We didn't fix to impress, we fixed to believe." That letter was discovered years later, framed and displayed at a museum dedicated to accessible design. School children visited on field trips. Teachers pointed to the dusty old wheelchair in the corner and said, "That chair helped launch 1,000 futures." But the true magic wasn't in the machine. It was in the belief that someone, even broken, could build something unbreakable. On the 10th anniversary of Soul Motion, Ava and Ethan stood quietly at the edge of a massive event celebrating accessible innovation. Drones filmed overhead, journalists waited eagerly. But the two of them looked only at each other. "Still remember that first sketch?" Ava asked. Ethan chuckled. "You drew a rocket on wheels." She smiled. "And you didn't say it. It was silly. You just said, 'Let's make it fly.'" That was always their secret. Dream big, believe bigger. Whether it was wheels or wings, they always believed something broken could soar again. That belief changed them, and then it changed the world.